Welcome to Mach 10 Sports, and we're glad to have you here today. Before we get into the action, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Mach 10 Sports. Also follow us on Twitter at Mach 10 Sports, and follow us on the Instagram at Mach 10 Sports SEC. Last episode, we brought in the SEC West. We said the Tide was going to be the representative from the West, going to represent the SEC West in Atlanta, get a chance to defend their title. Went through, we liked the division, really the depth between 2 through 7. Now we're going to cover the other side. We're going to go to the SEC East here and see what it's about. Before we really get to the team breakdown, let's give you a little overlay how I see it going into 2022. I think Georgia is there, obviously. They ended the drought. They won it all. Then there's a big gap. And I feel like we got a couple teams like the Tennessees of the world. Josh Heupel in his second year. We got Kentucky, Mark Stoops, probably the most... Besides Alabama and Georgia, the most consistent programs here in the last 7 or 8 years in the SEC. Also, we got South Carolina, who I've been vocal on social media. I like the Gamecocks this year if they can stay healthy. They're fighting for that 2 spot, in my opinion. And Florida, I think they're a little thinner than people like to give them credit for. A couple injuries here or there. May not be great, but I think they're in that conversation for a second. And I think you got Missouri on a little bit of their own level. And I think you got Vandy and another. We'll get into it. I just want to give you a little overlay before we went 1 through 7. But let's lead off here. No better timing than the defending SEC East champs, the defending national champs, Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart just taking over that division. There's no one really even challenging them right now. Ended the 41-year drought, national title. We all saw it in Indianapolis last year. Set records, that defense last year, probably the best defense of all time. That's coming. I was at school at Alabama when we had the 2011 defense. They averaged giving up about 8 points a game, but this defense on average give up 10.2 in today's modern offenses. That's a stat right there, ladies and gentlemen. That's a stat. 10.2 in modern day. Most people are averaging 16 to 20, and I consider that a good defense, but 10.2 last year. But they lost a lot of those guys. But with that being said, they lost a lot of guys, but set a lot of records with them leaving before they shut the door and left the Georgia program. Records from an NFL draft standpoint. Most total draft picks, most first-round defenders picked, and most defenders picked in the first 3 rounds. Incredible statistics there. Georgia just keeps loading up on talent. You see it in the recruiting rankings every year. They develop that talent, and those guys get drafted, and Kirby has that machine rolling right now in Athens. They got 73% of their production back on offense. Offense is probably going to have to lead them a little bit early. They got Stetson Bennett back at quarterback. Got some offensive linemen, Broderick Jones and the boys there. Berger on the offensive line as well. Cedric Van Pran. We also got some weapons on the outside. Maybe we'll get into it in a minute. Some guys that need to step up. But I think initially the offense is going to have to score some points to settle in the defense to make them feel comfortable. They're not going to replicate what they did last year in defense, but I don't think anybody out there is saying that. It's just going to be a reload. Like Kirby said at SEC Media Days, they're talented, just inexperienced. I'll give you 2 strengths here. I'm going to go tight end. Tight end is probably the best overall position group in the country. Todd Hartley is killing it. My past boss when I was at Georgia, he was the director of player personnel when I was there for 1 year, but he's done a phenomenal job just recruiting, developing. I mean, let's go through it. Brock Bowers. We all know about Brock. Great freshman year, had big-time games in the national championship playoffs. Darnell Washington, more of an inline guy, compliments Brock Bowers, but he's a huge guy and is a red zone threat, as we saw in the SEC championship game last year. And Arik Gilbert, if he can get it going, ceilings through the roof with that kid. And then they signed Oster Delp last year from West Forsyth, which will be a kid they end up developing. You'll hear that name as we get going. Just a pipeline, like I said, best position group in the entire country. Moving on to the defensive line edge, I think that is a great group as well. Guys back, Nolan Smith, Robert Bill, Jalen Carter, Zion Logue, and Tramil Walthor. Look out for the freshman Michael Williams, the Hardaway, Columbus, Georgia native. Again, inexperience, but there's a lot of talent. It is literally a reload. I feel like reload gets thrown around a little too much. There's about 2 programs in the SEC right now you could say that about. The guys down in Tuscaloosa and the guys at Athens can say that. Moving on to some concerns. Wide receivers, I just mentioned it a little bit ago. They have A.D. Mitchell, who I like, but you talk to people inside the program. That is a guy they feel like they cannot lose. Had a big touchdown against the Tide in the national championship, the rematch. He needs someone like Karis Jackson to step up and help him out. They like A.D. Mitchell a lot, a guy that was on kind of fringe of a guy they don't want to really lose. But after that, who? People are going to argue Ladd McConkey. I like the guy. He's a solid college player, is always going to be there, Mr. Reliable. Had some big games last year, specifically against Auburn is what people remember. But it's Georgia. It's time to have a dude. I know you had George Pickens, but I think George Pickens is going to be that guy that we're going to be sitting here down the line and be, man, he got a better NFL career than he had in college. Moving on, Dominic Blaylock is a guy that needs to get back to 2019 Dominic Blaylock before the knee injuries. He's a guy that could step up, be on the lookout for him. Another guy, Arian Smith, an All-American sprinter for the Georgia Bulldogs, 4x1 track team. I mean, the guy has the ability to take the top off the defense when he wants to. We just have to see it go out on Saturdays. We got to see it. We got to see production on Saturdays between this group. I think the talent's there. Just again, a little unproven. Going to the inside linebacker, another position of concern. I do think Demas Johnson will be a player for Georgia. He's going to be a player. Ryan Davis, Jalen Walker, Smail Munden, and Tresman Marshall are listed dudes. You're just not going to replace the guys they lost last year and set those records I was talking about. The SEC in general, they set records last year just with draft picks. So you're going to hear me when I'm going through this preview and other segments down the line. A lot of it is about depth, except for one or two teams. And I'm telling you, Georgia's one of those teams that doesn't have to worry about depth. But inside linebacker position, a lot of teams kind of got to worry about that. So a couple of those guys, Demas Johnson, I'm expecting some of the other four guys need to step up between Davis, Mondin, Walker, and Marshall. Going to the schedule. Let's pull up the schedule here. The Dogs open up in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta against Oregon. Old DC. Old Dan Lanning rolling into town with the boys. Familiarity. I still think the Dogs get it done. I just have a hard time believing Dan Lanning and then make the trip out there, first game of the year in Atlanta, and get the win in his first head coaching job. I think he'll have success at Oregon. Topic for another day. I just don't think they get that win. Sanford comes to town for the Dogs. They go at South Carolina. I think South Carolina at that point will still have Georgia's attention early in the year. Kent State comes to town at Missouri. Auburn at home. Vanderbilt at home. Bye week before the game in Jacksonville. I still call it the world's largest cocktail party, by the way, against Florida. Tennessee at home. At Mississippi State. A little tricky. At Kentucky. And they follow up with Georgia Tech at home. With that being said, I do have the Dogs finishing 12-0, 8-0. I just don't really think there's anyone on there that's going to challenge them. Every time they're going to have to get up, they're going to have an opportunity to get up. Their toughest 3-game stretch is later in the season, Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. I think that's the stretch. That's the stretch right there they could lose if they were to lose one. I think they passed that test with flying colors against all three. Again, every team that goes undefeated has to overcome something. They'll have a close game. I'm not saying that. They will definitely have a close game, maybe two. I just don't see them losing. Everybody likes to go back to the 2010 Alabama team that lost a game and had a lot of people back. They really kind of lost some key players off that first national championship team in 2009. And in 10, they played South Carolina, who won the East, Arkansas, who finished in the top 10, played in the Sugar Bowl that year with Ryan Mallett, Bobby Petrino, played LSU, who finished in the top 10 that year, and then Auburn won the national championship. They played Penn State out of conference. Georgia doesn't play anybody they don't play like that. They really don't. Who would be toughest game? Tennessee and I've said it before. I like Mississippi State. That could maybe be a tricky game, but I think Georgia's got the I think they got the horses to overcome the Bulldogs in the Start Bowl. Must-win game. They need to keep hammering it. They put the gap, separate it even more, guys, this year between themselves and the next team in the East. Next team in the East, I feel like it's kind of on their hooks right now, is Tennessee. My rankings, or my East Division rankings, how it shakes out may not show that, but I do think Tennessee, from a perception standpoint, Georgia needs to hammer that home and say, hey, there's still a big gap between us. Y'all still have a long way to go. So I would say that's the must-win, November 5th at home against Tennessee. But with that said, I do have Georgia winning the East. No surprise to many, but I do have the Dogs representing the East in Atlanta and having a chance to play Alabama for the third time in a calendar year. Moving on, number 2. Some people may call me crazy, but the South Carolina Gamecocks. You heard me. South Carolina Gamecocks. Overview. Great first year under Shane Beamer. A great, phenomenal first year. A lot of question marks. People kind of question that. Brought in some guys in the transfer portal. Spencer Rattler, Austin Stogner, We know about those two guys, came in from Oklahoma. I'm hearing Antoine Wells from inside the building is going to be a player. The big James Madison wide receiver transfer. Hearing he's having a great fall camp. They liked him in the summer. And then Devontae Reed's a safety. They need some help in the secondary. They like their starters, but they're a bit thin depth-wise, and we know injuries are inevitable. So a guy like Devontae Reed from Central Michigan will help kind of get some depth guys, some winnable minus guys in there. They got 82% of the production on offense back and 65% of the production back on defense. The strengths of this Gamecock team, the quarterback. Everybody might think I'm crazy. I said it on social media the other day. Most talented quarterback in South Carolina football. Program history, by the way. Most talented. I didn't say he was the most accomplished. I think that goes to Connor Shaw. I don't even know if Spencer Rattler will be able to overcome that. I don't think he's going to be above in the Gamecock lore. I don't think he's ever going to surpass Connor Shaw unless they go in like 10 games this year, which I don't think they get that far. I think they'll be good. But I think people are forgetting this guy in his career at Oklahoma. This is Spencer Rattler we're talking about. Listen to this. 70% completion percentage, 40 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's it. The guy was Heisman. I'm not as fired up about Heisman Trophy, the Heisman Trophy ceremony stuff as I used to be. I think it is what it is. There's no real surprise anymore, but it's an awesome award to win. But this guy, my point, was a Heisman Trophy candidate going into the 2021 season. Got replaced by a talented guy, Caleb Williams. He went off with Lincoln Riley to USC. Just needed a change of scenery, Spencer Rattler needed. Went to some familiar faces. Shane Beamer was at Oklahoma when Spencer was recruited. I believe he was there a year with him. Just some familiarity. I think he's got a lot to prove. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. I also think the edge, the defensive line is a strength. It may not say that on paper, but from what I'm hearing from some people in there, they like guys. Names hearing. Boogie Huntley, TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway. Jordan Strawn led the nation in sacks in 2020 at Georgia State. He's back. Run defense wasn't awesome last year, but there's no reason it can't get better, and that's a bold statement by me. I am banking on the Gamecocks if they stay healthy. So my strength for them is quarterback, defensive line, and edge. I think the defensive line takes a major jump this year, and I think the quarterback position is they're in the best possible quarterback position they've been in years. Going to some concerns. Offensive line. They returned their entire two deep, so you're probably wondering, why, Dave, do you have them as a concern? Well, reason, it wasn't great. I'm a big experience guy. I am. I really am. But this is almost like a put up or shut up year for this offensive line. Two deep back, but finished 11th in SEC in run push last year and 100th in pass protection sack rate. Not good. Not good. Played Missouri, who was dead last in rushing last year, and mustered up 57 yards. That's it. That's it. So they're going to have to step their game up, protect Spencer, and establish a run game. They're going to have to step up too deep. We got to get something done this year, guys. You got to get something done, South Carolina, if you're going to finish second in the East, which I have you, so I'm thinking you are. Another concern, I mentioned it in the overview, starting secondary, they're fine. They like the guys. Cam Smith will be an NFL guy. David Spalding after him, Darius Rush, Marcellus Dial, R.J. Roderick, and we mentioned Devontae Reed, the transfer from Central Michigan. I'm being told some walk-ons are going to travel, obviously, to get on the special team, to play some special teams, but also they're an injury or two away from playing some of those guys. It's a little scary. The Gamecocks are going to have to be on the right side of the injury bug this year. That's huge. They have to be. I'm banking they are. Let's get to the schedule for the Gamecocks here. Open up with Georgia State at home. It's a sneaky game. Sean Elliott's got the guys rolling at Georgia State. They're going to come to Columbia that Labor Day weekend. I think South Carolina gets that done. Tricky next game at Arkansas, which I think is one of the better SEC games of the year, and we'll be looking back at the beginning of the year being like, man, I wish we had that later because both these teams are going to be good. Then Georgia comes to town. Charlotte at home, South Carolina State at home, at Kentucky, bye week, Texas A&M at home, Missouri at home, at Vanderbilt, at Florida, Tennessee at home, and at Clemson. With that being said, I have the Gamecocks finishing 8-4 overall, 5-3 in league play to go and finish second in the East. I think their big 3-game stretch is at Florida, Tennessee, and at Clemson in the year. And I think they get 2 out of the 3. I think they go win in the Swamp. They beat Tennessee at home, and I think they lose to Clemson again to end the year. But I think that is the crucial point for South Carolina. I actually think they start off 0-2 in the SEC, and we're going to have a lot of doubters, but they're going to get hot in the middle of the year, stay healthy, we're hoping, and finish the year strong to get that second in the East. Must-win game. I think October 8th at Kentucky. Again, what I mentioned before this segment. We got a couple teams here vying for that second spot in the East behind the Georgia Bulldogs. This is one of those games. October 8th, South Carolina needs to go into Kroger Field in Lexington, Kentucky, and win that game. That's a battle for, hey, who wants this? Hey, you go knock off the second most consistent team in the SEC East in the last 10 years, the Kentucky Wildcats on the road. Hey, Shane Beamer, we're here to stay. That's what you have to do, and that's what you're saying by going to win that game. So I think that is the must-win game, October 8th at Kentucky. With that being said, I do have South Carolina obviously finishing second in the East. I just like the Gamecocks, and I like Spencer Rattler this year. Moving my third team in the East, the Tennessee Volunteers. Josh Heupel, second season. Probably expectations a little higher than they probably should be, and that's not fair to him because he exceeded them last year. Great first year, like we mentioned. Set 8 offensive school records. Most points, most yards, most touchdowns. You know what's even the crazier stat? Fewest interceptions. Fewest interceptions. For a team that throws the ball a lot, it's pretty impressive. School record. No better time, in my opinion, to be a Tennessee football fan than now. I mean, look, the NCAA stuff we're not going to get into with Jeremy Pruitt, the Pruitt era. It looks like Tennessee may not get much because they kind of cooperated, which is strange because most of the time teams cooperate in the NCAA, they get thrown the hammer at them. Story for a different day. But to my point, you got to feel from a recruiting standpoint, the trajectory of the team from last year, I think they're going to be better in the win total this year. Recruiting, NIL will help them. You got to feel as good as you have been in the last 12 years if you're a Tennessee Vol. Recruiting well, 11th overall, 6th in the SEC if you want to include the new SEC. I'm including Oklahoma and Texas, which this class probably by their junior year will be playing those guys. So I'm including it. 6th overall, 80% of the offensive production back, 68% of the defensive production back. Strengths of the team. I mean, how can you not talk about the strength of the team without Hendon Hooker, the Virginia Tech transfer from last year? Joe Milton gets hurt. He has his moment, never gives the job back. 31 to 3 touchdown interception ratio, best in the country last year for Hooker. Third best quarterback rating in the country. You can say what you want. A little bit of it's product of the system, which will get to my next point. But I think Hendon Hooker is one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and it's another year in the system, man. It's going to help him. I don't really see him slowing down. Another strength, I think just the overall offensive system here for Tennessee and that Josh Heupel has. Going back to Missouri, his 3 years at UCF. Last year at Tennessee, the guy always puts up offensive numbers. I mean, there's no denying that. The guy's going to spread you out, play sideline to sideline. They're going to try to open up run lanes, run some power. And if you want to start loading the box a little bit, they're just going to go to the horizontal pass game, get it quick out, maybe take a vertical shot down the field. They're just hard. It's almost a pick your poison, man. It's tough. And then Hendon Hooker's got some running ability, almost another running back there. Leads me to another point. Concerns. Running back. They need another running back. Jabari Small. Then who? Jabari Small's a solid player. But who's after him? Hearing Justin Williams-Thomas having a lot of rave reviews about this guy. Dylan Sampson, true freshman. After him, though, I mean, most productive returner from a rush standpoint would be Hendon Hooker. Concerned defensive line after Byron Young and Tyler Barron. Who is there after them? Some young guys they've recruited, that Rodney Jew, who I trust, who wants to run 10 deep out there. I just don't know if they're going to have the depth to get back there. There's that word. You're going to hear me say it a lot. I said it in my West preview. Depth in the SEC this year. They set records from a draft standpoint last year in the league. There's a lot of depth issues this year. It's just that one of those years. Next year it should be better. But some teams have some depth issues. Corners. Let's move to another one. Looks like there's 4 guys battling it out. But hear me out. Kamal Hayden, Christian Charles, Warren Burrell, and the Alabama transfer Brandon Turnage. The issue is 2 of them are sitting there on the sideline right now in Knoxville in red jerseys. You know what a red jersey? That means they're hurt. It's an injured guy. He's not participating. So by process of elimination, they have their 2 starting corners right now. And it's looking like it's Burrell and Turnage. But Hayden looks like he should be back. I don't know about the Christian Charles injury, but they're already thin there, and they got 2 guys out and sitting there in red jerseys. It's a concern. Schedule? Let's go take a look at the Tennessee schedule. Ball State on Thursday night, September 1st. I think the Vols get that. They got to go get the revenge game at Pitt at the old Heinz Field. Akron at home. Florida at home. Bye week at LSU. Then Bama the next week. Interesting time. They get both their West draws back-to-back. Then they get UT Martin at home, Kentucky at home, at Georgia, Missouri at home, at South Carolina, and at Vanderbilt at home. Remember, they switched the Georgia-Auburn, Georgia-Tennessee game up, so they play Georgia later in the year now, which could be interesting for the East development. Maybe if Tennessee gets hot there and comes in with one loss and the East is on the line. But with that said, I have the Tennessee Vols finishing 8-4 and 4-4 in conference. Their 3-game stretch, I'm really putting 4 weeks in here, but their 3-game stretch, Florida throwing a bye week at LSU and Alabama. The thing about that LSU game is the week before, can you imagine if they roll into that game undefeated and they got a bye week for LSU? That game against Alabama, the third Saturday in October, where Tennessee will try to exercise their demons in the 16-game losing streak to the Tide. If both those teams roll in undefeated, one of the most anticipated third Saturday in October games in a while, LSU's a trap game in Tiger Stadium. Like, they may be looking forward to that next weekend. You don't hear that a lot. People usually aren't a trap game going to LSU. It's usually an attention grabber. But just interesting timing. Must-win game, September 24th versus Florida. It's time to beat Florida, Tennessee. Billy Napier, with all due respect, I think he's going to do a great job at Florida. He should not come into Neyland Stadium this year and beat you. That is a must-win for Josh Heupel. Or there may be some critics out there on the old checkerboard on 247 Sports that are calling for some heads. That'd be a bad start. They need to win that game in Neyland. They need to exercise the Gator Demons. With that said, I have the Tennessee Vols finishing third in the SEC East. Moving on. Fourth, I got the Florida Gators. Overview Billy Napier's first season, bringing in a modern-day staff. I like the way he's got it set up. It's been talked about a lot. The Florida Athletic Department has bumped the staff salary pool from $6.1 million to $7.5 million. He was very picky in his jobs. Rumor he turned down Florida, maybe South Carolina, if I remember right. But he was very picky and selective. And Scott Strickland was somebody he believed in, and they upped the support staff pool. So he's got an army of people doing a lot of things. Very specialized over there. That's how modern-day college football is going to be. So props to Billy. He learned under Dabo Swinney, learned under Nick Saban. Top 3, I would say, probably best coaches, current active coaches that he learned under. And his dad was a high school Hall of Fame coach in South Carolina. So the guy knows what he's doing. It's just a matter of time. 72% of the offensive production is back. 58% of the defensive production is back. Strengths. I like the quarterback. Now, let me say this. Anthony Richardson, I'll say this. Highest floor, lowest ceiling of any player in the league. What do we really know about Anthony Richardson? Should he have played more than that Alabama game? Would they have won? Maybe. Had the hamstring issue he pulled against South Florida last year, the week before they played Bama. But who's to say they'd have won that game? But I do think Billy Napier will get that developed, build the offense around him, set him up for success. He's going to have some help from the outside. I don't really like a lot of their playmakers. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think Anthony Richardson's that guy who's a very high ceiling, a little Cam Newton-ish. He's not Cam Newton, but a little Cam Newton-ish. If he can develop as a passer, he's another running back there that people are going to load the box. And then if he can take the top off the defense and get some help on the outside, Florida could be okay on offense if they stay healthy. Moving on, left side of the offensive line I like. You got guys with experience, Richard Garage at left tackle and Ethan White on the inside at left guard. I think that unit is good, just very thin, but the starters are fine. They brought in 2 guys from Louisiana, Osiris Torrance and Cameron Waits, to help with depth there. I like their starting lineup, especially the left side, like I'm saying, but a couple injuries here and there. Depth, remember, that's the key word of this segment. It could really hurt the Gators. Concerns, like I mentioned, wide receiver. Jacob Copeland transferred out. I know Kyle Pitts plays wide receiver. He's not on the team this year. There's no one like him on the team this year. There's no Trevon Grimes showing up on the team this year. There's no Kadarius Toney. They don't have the weapons on this year's team. Return of Justin Shorter, more of a possession guy, underneath guy. And they got Xavier Henderson, who's more to take the top off the defense. Yesterday, I saw the Ricky Purcell kid that transferred in from Arizona State. It led Arizona State in receptions last year. He's hurt. He's out for the year next year. I believe he's out for the year next year. That hurts. They need someone stepping up on the outside. One of their top tight ends, Kamori Gamble, transferred to UCF. You're usually used to seeing Florida have more playmakers, speed, either in the backfield or on the outside to help. That's a little bit of a concern for me this year. No real dude from the skill position. All a bunch of winnable guys. Linebacker depth. Again, the D word. You got Ventrell Miller coming back from injury, led the team in tackles in 2020. Signed the number 1 JUCO linebacker into one Black, who should help. But after that, they got Amari Burney and Derek Wingo. But if those guys don't help, because inevitably, between Miller bouncing back from an injury, Black having his first time getting some action in the SEC, Burney and Wingo are at to step up, and you're banking no injuries. Again, I think I keep saying the same thing for a lot of these teams. It's all going to come down for injuries between these 2 through 7 spots, I think, in both divisions, but specifically the East. Let's go to the Gators schedule here. They open up with one of the more intriguing games of opening weekend. Utah comes to Florida. Be an interesting game. Everybody, again, I'm one of those people overestimate the first week. Everybody's fired up. It's all their national championships. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's feeling good right now. You talk to anybody in fall camp, we're going to be good. This may be one of the more talented teams we've had. Everybody feels that way. You get a lot of teams' best shots the first weekend. That's going to be a great game. They get Kentucky coming to town the next week. They need to win one of those games, or probably preferably the league game. Then they get South Florida coming to home, at Tennessee, Eastern Washington at home, Missouri at home, LSU at home, bye week, Georgia and Jacksonville, at Texas A&M, South Carolina at home, at Vandy, and then end the year with the in-state rivalry at Florida State and Tallahassee. I have the Florida Gators finishing 6-6 and 3-5 in conference. Now, for all you Gators about to go jump off the plank, finishing recruiting strong, and it's a good year. I'll give you that. Dan Mullen and the boys didn't recruit that well there, guys. The cupboard's left bare from a Florida standpoint, and especially from who you're trying to catch in the East, your big rival, Georgia. You're probably in that little bit of a third tier. They win 8 games. It's a great year for Florida this year. They just get a tough out-of-conference draw with playing Utah, and even Florida State has some guys, which I know is a yearly annual game. But still, it's your yearly out-of-conference game. That's tough. But I think it'll be a 6-6, 3-5 year for Florida, finishing 4th in the East. Going to my 5th team in the SEC. A lot of people will be thinking I'm crazy here, but I do have the Kentucky Wildcats here. I know they're a preseason ranked high team for a lot of people because of Will Levis, but we'll get to that in a minute. Mark Stoops, second longest tenured coach in the SEC after Coach Saban. They ranked in the top 25 of most win conversion and player development metrics. So what I'm saying with that is they produce the most NFL draft picks from where they recruit and how many games they win. That's awesome. They develop more players for the NFL and get the most from a win conversion standpoint off their recruiting ranking than anybody in the country. That's awesome. Mark Stoops has done a fabulous job there in Kentucky. Has to replace the big blue wall, though. Top receiver of all time, Wandell Johnson, Mr. Football in Kentucky, transferred from Nebraska. They lose him. And they lose offensive coordinator Liam Cohn, went back to the Los Angeles Rams. New OC, Rich Scangarello, and they got a new offensive line coach, Zach Yinser. 59% of the offensive production back, 72% of the defensive production back. I'll give Mark Stoops credit. He's playing Lynn Bowden back there for a while at quarterback. Just a little ground and pound will win with defense. Kind of got like Saban did in the 14-15 years. Said, hey, if we're going to go take this to the next level, always evolving, we need to go spread it out. Get a guy that kind of comes from the tree like Liam Cohen. Hey, he leaves to go back to the Rams. We'll keep it in the same tree with Rich Scangarello. So I applaud Mark Stoops for that. I think that is being innovative, adjusting to the game, always evolving, and I appreciate that from a football standpoint. Going to the strengths, obviously, Will Levis at quarterback. Guy's a great talent, just off the film, just screams, hey, can throw it sideline to sideline, can spray it all over the field. Looks like he is a real leader in interviews you watch, stuff you read, stuff you hear inside the building. People really like that, like him. He is who he is. Also, guy can run the football. You know, he was behind only Matt Corral last year in quarterback rushing yards. Big guy can run. That helps, especially with him having to replace a lot of some experience on the offensive line from last year. Chris Rodriguez, it's a strength. The running back position, another strength. Finished second in the league in rushing last year with 1,300 yards. He did get suspended. Who knows how long he's out. They really need him back for that Florida game, but it'd be a weird one-game suspension. I don't anticipate him playing in the Swamp to open the conference play second week of the year. But when they get him back, that'll be a huge asset, one of the better running backs in the league. They got a solid second guy, Cavassier Smoke, but they will need Chris Rodriguez at some point to reach their potential. Deep linebacker room. Let me name them. Jaquiz Jones, DeAndre Square, who will ultimately mass over 300 career tackles at some point, and join the likes of Danny Trevathan, who we all remember, Wesley Woodyard. He's going to be in great company. At some point, he's going to get over 300 tackles. Throw in another guy, Trevin Wallace and De'Aaron Jackson. It's a good group of linebackers. You don't say a lot about a lot of schools, but I do think that is a strength there for the Wildcats. Moving on to weaknesses, I think it's wide receivers and defensive line. They aren't going to replace Wan'Dale Robinson in a year. There's not. 1,000-yard receiver. Kentucky just doesn't recruit that skill guy like that to replace it. They brought in a guy from Virginia Tech, Tavion Robinson. From talking to people inside, he doesn't carry the mass or the frame that Wan'Dale had, where he could probably hang on to the touches, just a little bit thinner. So if you're giving him the amount of touches Wan'Dale got, he gets shot, he gets injury. Big guys beat up on little people, guys. Big guys beat up on little people. Defensive line is going to sound crazy. Vince Marrow is one of the best assistants in the country, but they did lose a lot. Lost 3 starters. 2 of the top ones, Markel McCall and Josh Paschal. They need Octavius Oxendine to step up. Had a 2-sack performance against LSU last year. Was really peaking. Got hurt in that game, though. But I think at some point they may be better a little bit towards the end of the year. But at the beginning of the year, it'll be interesting to see how Coach Marrow, Coach Stoops kind of develop that defensive line. It lost a lot of production from last year. And let's go to the schedule. They open up with Miami of Ohio at home. At Florida, we've talked about. That's a big game for both teams, Florida and Kentucky. Youngstown State comes to town. Northern Illinois comes to town. At Ole Miss, sneaky game on October 1st. South Carolina comes to Kroger Field. Mississippi State comes to Kroger Field. Bye week. They go to Knoxville, Neyland Stadium, at Tennessee, at Missouri, Vanderbilt at home, Georgia at home, and then in the year in-state rivalry against the Louisville Cardinals at home. With that being said, I have the Kentucky Wildcats finishing 6-6, 3-5. They lose the tiebreaker to Florida head-to-head. I think Florida gets that in the swamp. They split one of their first 2 games. But back to Kentucky, finished 6-6, 3-5. Big 3-game stretch for the Cats. At Ole Miss, which I said will be a sneaky game. South Carolina and Mississippi State. Their season's going to be defined by that 3-game stretch right there. Must win. They got to win October 8th for South Carolina. That's a big game for both those teams. You heard me say it was a must-win for South Carolina. That is a big game for both teams. Need to win October 8th at home against South Carolina to continue to keep that chokehold on the second team in the East, most consistent team in the division here in the past 8 to 10 years. So with that said, I do think the Kentucky Wildcats finish again 6-6, 3-5, and 5th in the East. My 6th team in the SEC East, the Missouri Tigers. Overview 11-12 in his first 2 seasons. Coach Eliah Drinkwitz, which surprisingly is the best start in program history in a 2-year span. In a coach's first 2 years at Missouri, 11-12 is best, and that is held by Eliah Drinkwitz. Recruiting's going well. Previous staff only signed 9% of the state's blue chip prospects. Drink has signed 42%, which is impressive in a 3-class span, 2-year span. Needs a big year to keep that recruiting momentum going, though. I think in today's time, you can lose that recruiting momentum real quick if they see kids transferring out, you're not producing on the field, etc. It's just easy. Just people are quick to judge, instant gratification. It's just people don't hang on as much as they used to. A lot of question marks this year for the Missouri Tigers. 52% of the offensive production is back. 78% of the defensive production is back. Strengths. I like the young receivers. Like Luther Burden and Jamarian Wayne will be 2 guys that they need to step up early, which will help them in recruiting, saying, hey, we get the Rock Tire youngsters early. D-line experience. D-line's got some talent. Trayon Jeffcoat is the best guy. They brought in a guy who played a lot on one of the better defenses in Oklahoma State last year. Jaden Jergen, the Oklahoma State transfer, will help. And then if you consider Ennis Rakestraw a starter, they would have the entire secondary back. So they got experience back on defense, which you like in their first 11. Just depth will be an issue. Concerns. Quarterback. Saw yesterday they named Brady Cook the starter. Last year, 77% completion percentage and 2 touchdowns. I don't really think they have a guy there. No offense to Brady. They need to get better. They brought in Jack Abraham, who may get some reps last year, but that'd be his 5th school. I'm not a huge fan of the Missouri Tiger quarterback room right now. They do need to go probably get someone next year. Also, the inside linebacker room is very thin. They really just have Chad Bailey, Devin Nicholson, and the Florida transfer Tyrone Hopper. After that, they're really thin. Like I keep saying about a lot of people's positions on the front 7. But quarterback and linebacker are two major concerns. Like we said, quarterback, the most important position in all of sports. If you don't have one, it's really tough to win in today's game. Let's go to the schedule for the Missouri Tigers. Open up with Louisiana Tech at home. Then they go back and face a familiar Big 12 foe at Kansas State second week. Abilene Christian comes to town. Then at Auburn, Georgia at home, at Florida, bye week, Vanderbilt at home, at South Carolina, Kentucky at home, at Tennessee, New Mexico State at home, and wrap up with the rival Arkansas in Columbia. And the 3-game stretch that's big for the Missouri Tigers will be at South Carolina, Kentucky at home, and at Tennessee. I think it's a 3 crucial game stretch. They need to get one. I personally don't think they do, but it would be great for the Missouri Tigers if they could get one of those 3. Must-win game November 5th versus Kentucky. I think they need to win that game at home. People are expecting them to beat Vanderbilt, but they need to go get that second conference win, give some kind of hope, get that game at home against Kentucky later in the year. It would leave a good taste in your mouth kind of as we end towards the end of the year. But again, I got Missouri finishing 6th in the East, 4-8 overall, and 1-7 in conference. Moving to someone has to finish 7th, and it's going to be the Vanderbilt Commodores. I like what Clark Lea's doing in his second year at his alma mater. The guy has a plan. I really do think he's going to get the max amount of time in today's game that they're going to give him. Went winless in conference last year, marching at a defeat last year by 26 points a game in conference. Not good. Signed the 32nd ranked class in the country, best in a decade at Vanderbilt. Recruiting's there. They have a plan. Strengths, quarterbacks, if you want to say, both bring a little different dynamic between Mike Wright and Ken Seals. Mike Wright, a little bit more of a dynamic guy, can make plays with his legs, improvise, especially with having to place a lot on the offensive line. That could help. Ken Seals, more your pure pocket passer, can make a little bit more, better athlete than give him credit for, but he's going to make the plays more so with his arm, has a little bit more touch. Young guy can continue to develop. Linebackers should be solid. We didn't say that about a lot of teams, but I do like the Vanderbilt Commodore linebacker group. Probably their best overall unit on the team with Anthony Orji and Ethan Barr. Their top 2 tacklers from last season are both back. They brought in Nashville native, Clemson transfer Kane Patterson back from CPA High School. He was at Clemson these past years. Could provide some good depth for him. Moving to some concerns, it's easier to tell you what isn't a concern. I put everything. I mean, defense was hit the most from the transfer portal on an already bad defense. 6 defensive linemen transferred, 2 starters. Their top 2 signees in the 2020 class are gone. They're not in Nashville anymore. Offensive line is paper thin. Best 2 offensive linemen transferred out. We know about Tyler Steen transferring to Alabama, probably going to play for Alabama this year. He's gone. Let's look at the schedule, though, for Vanderbilt. Open up on week 0 at Hawaii. Interesting game. That's a must-win. They have to win that game. They play Elon after that. Wake Forest at home. At Northern Illinois, at Alabama, bye week, Ole Miss at home, at Georgia, at Missouri, bye week, South Carolina at home, at Kentucky, Florida at home, Tennessee at home, and that's it for the season. I unfortunately have the Vanderbilt Commodores finishing 3-9 and 0-8 in the league. I think they get 3 wins. I still think that SEC streak, that'll be their 3rd year in a row, I believe, going winless in the league from 2020, 2021, and then this year. That's tough. They need to get 1 conference win. They really do. That would be great for Clark Lee and continuing to build that recruiting momentum, but you have to have some kind of success on the field. Getting 1 conference win should be a goal for them this year. Their schedule, the 3-game stretch, I think that they have to be 2-1 at least, is at Hawaii, Elon, and Wake Forest. I know I just said they needed to get a conference win, and that's their must win for me, but they have to start off 2-1 to build some confidence in those first 3 games. At Hawaii, Elon, Wake Forest. I do think they start 2-1 in that 3-game stretch, but their must win game, Missouri. At Missouri, they need to end the streak some way, somehow, just end the streak. That's what they need to do. That needs to be the goal for this year, not for the big picture, but just internally. You need to know they need to end that SEC 2-year conference losing streak. But with that said, again, I have Vanderbilt Commodores going 3-9 and 0-8 in the league and finishing last in the SEC East. That is my SEC East preview. Keep following us on Mach 10 Sports for the best information on SEC sports.